Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting the finale, Yndrasta, the Celestial Spear from the Dominion box set. Now I've gone ahead and assembled the entire model. Now I will point out one note, you probably could assemble this without the wings. I was able to manage with the wings assembled, but if you want for more ease of painting, you don't actually have to put the wings on at the start. You can paint them separate. I didn't realize that until afterwards. And then when it came to priming, I used Bright Touch Gray Car Primer. Now before I continue, I actually want to take a moment to speak of what is my thought process when painting it. Now normally what I do is I want to try to, paint the largest section of the body or whatever has the most color. Like if it was a tank, I would paint the large painted color of the tank first and then go on to smaller, more detailed areas. But with something like this, I would also consider what is the most messy. Dry brushing, airbrushing, any of those techniques should be done first over other things, simply so that they don't spill over. So looking at this now, apart from the initial base coats from airbrushing to highlight, add detail and stuff like that, what I'm looking at is to actually painting the base first, because that'll use a lot of dry brushing and stuff, and unfortunately the person is standing on the rocks, and so there's a chance of ruining that, so I want to clear that area, the base, first. So the base is essentially going to be painted first compared to the rest of the model, and then I make it up as I go. And now with Magos Purple, Pallid Witchflesh, and White Scar, we're going to do the pre-coating. With Magos Purple, I'm going to apply this only on the person, the armor itself, not the wings and not the base. And then from a 45-degree angle downwards, I'm going to spray Pallid Witchflesh and coloring and fixing everything with that. Now after undercoating it with this stuff, I then realized this is probably the best time to do the wings. So I take Liquitex Acrylic Ink Cerulean Blue Hue and I can't pronounce that, green blue shade. Yeah, good luck. And then I use the airbrush and I apply it to as best as I can match it to the cover art. The parts of the wings that are close to the body, I paint with the light blue. The tips of the feathers, of the major feathers, I airbrush with the dark green. And then once all this is done, I then take White Scar and then I dry brush all over the wings. This helps the colors to flow together, picks out all the individual feathers, and yeah, and highlights the details on the main body and stuff. Alright, last hurrah with these bases. So with Dark Reaper, Dawnstone, Administratum Grey, Drakenhof Nightshade, and Lamian Medium, we're going to paint the base. We're going to start off with a base layer of Dark Reaper. However, I only do one coat, and you can see from this picture that it didn't have perfect coverage, but honestly that's fine with this, with how the rocks are. Then we do a dry brushing of Dawnstone all over the stone. And then we take Administrative Grey, and then we apply it all over the stone, but a lighter dry brush. And once that's done, we take a 1-to-1 mix of Drakenhof Nightshade and Lamian Medium and apply it all over. And now with Transparent Raw Sienna and Ulthuan Grey, we're going to make a mix, and I'm going to demonstrate how I mix it in front of you. And basically we want to paint the tree. Now, looking back, I probably should have gone with a darker brown color, but we're experimenting. The idea is that this is a base layer, and in the future we will use an oil wash to add the depth and shadow. And, I should probably use a darker color, but here we are. Now, moving on to the armor. With Transparent Raw Sienna and a 1-to-1 mix with Air Runefang Steel, we're going to paint the armor. Now, I noticed that her armor is like a silver burnished, bronzish silver, a very light bronze. And so we're going to start off using this instead of the burnt sienna that I used with the other models, so it creates a much lighter tone. And then once that's done, I basically consistently add more Runefang Steel into the mix to make it lighter and lighter, and basically I start off with a 1-to-1, then maybe a 1 part acrylic to 2 parts Runefang, and then 1 part acrylic to 3 parts Runefang, and then I end up with a final layer of pure Runefang steel on the most raised areas, the breastplate, and the edges of certain things. Okay, now pretty much the same mix as last time, except a small amount of carbon black, and this will create a darker kind of greenish burnished metal, and I use this for the handles of their weapons, so for her spear and for the little sword that she has. And now with a 1-to-1 mix of transparent burnt sienna and air Runefang steel, we'll then paint this onto the metals of the spear and the sword. And then with carbon black and Runefang steel air, we will now paint the blades and the scales. So I'll mix in a little bit of carbon black with the Runefang steel to make it darker, and I apply this to some of the metals on, well, the metal blades, the spear, as well as the base layer for the scales, although I don't show that immediately, and on some parts of the spear, like these spiky bits. And then I go with the pure Runefang steel, and I use this to highlight the edges of the blades and the faces of the scales. Alright, moving on to another detail. With Elysian green, orc flesh, and Thondia brown, we're going to paint the reeds and little thingies that are on the base. So with Elysian green on the grass and the things that are falling down, I don't know, moss or something. And once that's done, we'll take Thondia brown and paint the... I actually don't know what this is, even though it exists in real life. This brown part of this grass thingy. And then I'll take orc contrast orc flesh and just apply it all over just to get it some depth. However, for more detail, probably should mix in a little bit of Lamian medium so that it would flow better and it would disperse better on the greens. But, oh well, this is just a quick job. And then with Ulthuan Grey, Pallid Witch Flesh, Emperor's Children, and Contrast Purple, Mago's Purple, we're going to paint the cloak. Now for the inside, even though it's already white, I just want to refine it and make sure it's up to par. So with Ulthuan Grey, we apply this in the deep areas, or the furthest parts from the light, and any parts that also got some extra paint on them. And then with Pallid Witch Flesh, we use this to cover everything that's close to the light, so that the inside of the cloak, or the bottom side, is very bright towards the light. Now with Emperor's Children, we paint the back of the cloak, and then I do some contrast purple mixed with a little bit of Lamian medium in. However, it's not that good. Okay, so basically what happens is the Mago's Purple is too messy and just nasty when it goes on, even with a little bit of Lamian medium for something like this. So what I do is I go back and I take my Emperor's Children mix and I mix it with Lamian medium and I dilute it heavily, and then I just tap all over the place. And basically what I do is I apply multiple layers. I probably apply like 4 or 5 layers of this, gradually going up from the shadowy areas up so that the color is smooth and I can see a color progression from dark to light. And eventually I go back with a little bit of Mago's Purple and a lot more Lamian medium, and I apply small amounts of this in the deeper, darker recesses over time, a few layers of that to build a better transition. So this was a more laborious way to fix a messy way. So that's the thing with cloaks, is you always have to take your time with them. There's rarely a fast and easy way to handle them unless they're dark brown cloaks. And then with Rakarth flesh, we paint these little banners coming out the side. And then with Hopgrot hide, we paint these skulls that are on the base. And then with Mephiston red, Evil Sun scarlet, and Troll Slayer orange, we're going to paint these gems that she has. Her spear and her sword have these on the front and back, as well as this little gem-like thing on her right chest piece, whatever. So we start with the darkest layer of Mephiston red. Then we cover 90 to 95% of that with Evil Sun scarlet, and then we apply a drop of that a few times because the paint is thin onto the center of each of the gems. And then with Thondia brown, we paint the belt and the straps on the forearms. However, I messed this up a bit and I have to undo it with some water and a brush and then reapply it because it's a little difficult to get it right. I don't know why, just the angles of these little straps. Alright, we're going to try something. So with Transparent Raw Sienna, Lamian Medium, Ulthuan Grey, and Pyrrole Red, we're going to mix it together to make a flesh color and add a little bit of Lamian Medium to make it more dilute because the flesh color is mostly due to the Ulthuan Grey color itself mixed with a little bit of the acrylic inks, but it's too thick to really be a good thin layer, so I apply some Lamian Medium. Unfortunately, I apply too much and it is a very thin coat and it's rather transparent. So I apply multiple coats until I can get a good base layer. I then add more Ulthuan Grey into the mix and then apply that as a highlight. And then I do the same thing with even more Ulthuan Grey, and it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all. So, round 2. So with Cadian Fleshtone and Kislev Flesh, I move on. I already started with the base layer of painting everything over with Cadian Fleshtone, and then I did a mix of 1-to-1 with Cadian and Kislev, and meh. I then kept doing extra layers, adding a bit more Kislev Flesh here and there, but it just looks plain and lifeless. I don't get it. Alright, with Koala Green Shade, Gulliman Contrast Flesh, and Lamian Medium, I mix them all 1-to-1 and I use the Koala Green Shade, which is a blue, and I apply it around to her eyes because for some reason her eyes have this greenish bluish kind of like eyeliner. And then I do the same thing with the Gulliman Flesh, but I apply it onto her lips to make it stand out more, and it looks silly. On the box art, she has very white skin, so I try to emulate that. So I take Kislev Flesh mixed with Pallid Witch Flesh, dilute it a bit with Lamian Medium, and I apply it to highlight and lighten her skin. And by the end of it, I realized that I basically painted the Joker's face on this person, and it just sucked. So, starting all over. So I took some isopropyl alcohol and a pretty accurate brush, and then I applied it repeatedly to the face to remove a lot of the paint because at this point all the detail was just getting removed, and I basically removed it all the way down to the primer. Alright, so I can't seem to get the face right, so I'm just going to go with something incredibly simple and basic and just make it passable so that it blends in with the background and so it doesn't detract. So with Kislev Flesh, Skeleton Horde Contrast, and Lamian Medium, I'm going to paint them on with this. I'm going to start with a layer of Kislev Flesh as the base layer, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Skeleton Horde Contrast mixed 1-to-1 with Lamian Medium, or actually a little bit more Lamian Medium, and I'm just going to apply it as a layer. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep doing highlights of Kislev Flesh, then applying the mix of Skeleton Horde and Lamian Medium. And I do progressive layers, around 3 of them. I mean, there's subtle changes. And then I do a final layer with pure Kislev flesh on her nose, her eyebrows, and her ear, and the most prominent facial areas. Alright, moving on from that disaster, with Ulthuan Air Grey and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to paint the hair. I'm going to start with the base layer of Ulthuan Grey. This is still pretty good as a paint, it just needs a little bit of water and it's not clumpy like the regular one. Then I take the Pallid Witch Flesh and I use it to basically highlight the individual strands of hair. Alright, with some good mineral spirits and Winsor & Newton oil color burnt umber, I then make this into a sludge, not really a wash, and then I apply it all over the base, the tree in the back, and onto select areas of the armor, like her stomach, some of the jewels and stuff, some places with rivets, the handles of her sword and spear, the burnished part, bunch of areas like that. I barely want to use this on her armor, and I do not want to touch her wings with it. And now for some of the final details. With Baharoth Blue, we're going to water this down a lot to make it not a wash, but just a very diluted paint. And we're going to paint it directly into the symbols in her spear and sword blade, as well as the symbol in her back, because on the box art, it sort of has this glowing effect. So I'm just going to take some watered down stuff, fill it in, and when it dries, it'll look right. And now with Steel Legion Drab, Skeleton Horde Contrast, Lamian Medium, and Corvus Black, we're going to paint this fantasy squirrel that is on the tree in the back. I mean, it's there. To keep up the standard of the model, I have to paint it. So Steel Legion Drab is the base coat. And then we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Skeleton Horde and Lamian Medium. And then when that dries, we're going to apply a second layer, but onto the tail only. Then we'll take the Steel Legion Drab in a fine brush, and we're just going to paint it onto the tips of his spine that's jutting out and the major flat portions on the body, just as a highlight. And then we'll take a drop of Corvus Black and apply it repeatedly to his eye. Simple, easy, done. Now for pretty much the last steps is AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish and Liquitex Gloss Varnish. Now with AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish, we're going to take a pretty big brush because there's a lot to paint, and we're going to apply it all over the base, the tree, her wings, her cape, and I think her face. Yeah. And once all that is done, we're going to take Gloss Varnish and we're going to apply it to the gems on her spear, her sword, and on her chest, the upper right part of her chest. Alright, I'm done with Dominion. Alright, finished, finally. Well, not completely finally with all the stuff in the box, but you know what, this is good enough. Alright, so she was actually more refreshing and relaxing to paint. Actually, I painted her almost entirely in one session, and then I got lazy. And of course, the oils take a while to dry, so I'm kind of stuck with that. So overall, like, the base looks great. The wings are pretty good. The armor's fine. I did what I could with the face, but whatever. Overall, I feel it's honestly, the base kind of raises it in quality. So I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10. I just keep seeing her face and I'm like, meh. So, it was a more interesting project. It was more fun than the previous ones. I definitely had more fun with her different armor and how things turned out, but yeah. So, that's it for me for the Dominion box set for a while. I still have 2 kits, but yeah, whatever. Moving on to Black Templars and Beast Snaggas and my massive pile of shame, which I really have to do. Ah well, like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, and I'll see you relatively soon. Bye.